Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're taking on a really important new paper. Our mission is to break it down for you, give you the essence of this research that honestly shifts how we should think about biodiversity loss in our rivers and lakes.
Yeah, the big one.
We're diving into translocated species exceed alien species in homogenizing freshwater fish assemblages, led by Wang. It's a shortcut for you to grasp a pretty insidious threat.
And that threat, the big picture here, is something called biotic homogenization.
Yeah.
It sounds complex, but it's basically ecosystems losing their distinct character, starting to look the same everywhere.
Ecological uniformity.
Exactly. And the paper specifically looks at the decline in beta diversity. That's just a measure of how different regional habitats are from each other. When beta diversity drops, you lose uniqueness, you lose function, and really you lose future evolutionary potential. It's a serious problem.
No, usually when we talk about this kind of thing, invasive species, right, we blame the outsiders, the alien species from other continents.
The usual suspects.
They're the ones making headlines. But this paper, it sort of flips the script. It argues we need to split non-natives into two different groups. And that's where it gets really interesting. The findings for one of those groups, well, they change everything.
That really is the core novelty, yeah. And we need to be super clear on these terms. It matters hugely for, actual conservation on the ground. Policy, too.
Okay, lay them out for us.
Right. So first you have alien species. These are the ones we typically mean by invasive. They come from outside the region we're concerned about. Think different continent, completely separate river system, that kind of thing.
Got it. Foreign invaders.
Mm-hmm. But then you have translocated species.
Okay.
Now, these are actually native species to the broader region, but they've been moved outside their natural historical range, just somewhere else within that same general ecoregion.
So like moving a fish from one river basin to the next one over.
Exactly. Often happens because of us, Aquaculture, stocking fish for anglers, maybe canals connecting waterways accidentally. They're regional travelers, not global ones.
And to figure out the impact of this distinction, the researchers zeroed in on a specific place. Yunnan, China.
Yeah, Yunnan. It's an incredible place ecologically, a global biodiversity hotspot for freshwater life.
Really? How significant?
Well, it holds roughly half of all freshwater fish species in China. Huge diversity and tons of endemism species found absolutely nowhere else. But it's also facing intense pressure, development, lots of dams, aquaculture booming.
So a perfect, if maybe slightly tragic, place to study these long-term impacts.
Precisely. A natural laboratory for this kind of change.
And they didn't just count species lists, did they? You mentioned they went deeper than just taxonomic diversity.
Oh, absolutely. That's key. To really get at the loss of, let's say, ecological integrity, they measure diversity in three ways. Taxonomic, so yes, the species lists.
Standard stuff.
Right. But also phylogenetic diversity. That looks at the evolutionary relatedness, how much unique evolutionary history is represented.
Okay, the family tree aspect.
Kind of, yeah. And third, functional diversity. This is about what the fish do. Their traits, what they eat, how they move, their role in the ecosystem. If you lose distinctiveness across all three, the system's really becoming simplified, more fragile.
Right. Okay, so they have these categories, alien versus translocated, and these three ways to measure diversity. How did they track this over time? It sounds like you'd need decades of data.
They did. They managed to pull together a really comprehensive data set going all the way back to 1950. So a mid-century baseline right up to 2022.
Wow.
Yeah, covering 828 fish species in total. And to see the cumulative change, they basically divided this span into 4 snapshots. Before 1960, then up to 1980, up to 2000, and finally the period ending in 2022.
So they could see how the picture changed step by step.
Exactly. They could quantify the change over each period. A negative change value basically meant homogenization was happening. Things were becoming more similar.
And what forces, what potential drivers did they test against these changes?
They looked at 3 main groups of potential drivers. First, anthropogenic disturbance, the overall human footprint. Second, habitat variability, so the natural environmental differences. And third, biotic resistance.
Biotic resistance, that's the idea that a healthy native ecosystem can fight off invaders, right?
That's the classic hypothesis, yeah. They used some pretty sophisticated statistical models, GLMMs and SIMs, for those interested to figure out not just if these drivers mattered, but how they interacted. Sometimes the effects are indirect.
Okay, this sets the stage. Now let's get to that core finding you mentioned, the one that kind of turns things on their head. The impacts of alien and translocated species weren't the same over time.
Not at all. They were asynchronous. Their effects played out differently. Let's take the alien species first, the true foreigners.
Okay.
Initially, when these aliens were first introduced, maybe into like an isolated lake up on a plateau, they sometimes actually caused differentiation.
Wait, differentiation made things less similar. Temporarily, yes. Because they were so different compositionally, evolutionarily distinct, they initially made that one local spot more different compared to its neighbors, like adding a totally new color to the palette.
Huh. Okay, but I'm guessing they didn't last as they spread out.
Exactly. As these alien species established and spread, their effect generally shifted towards homogenization, taxonomically and functionally, making species lists and ecological roles more similar across sites. But, and this is a critical point, they often consistently promoted phylogenetic differentiation.
Still kept things different on the evolutionary level?
Yeah, because they tend to be quite distant relatives of the native fish. Even as they spread, they're adding unique branches to the local evolutionary tree, increasing that overall phylogenetic distance.
Okay, so aliens. Initial differentiation, then some homogenization, but they stay evolutionarily distinct.
Yeah.
Now, the translocated species, the ones moved just within the region. Complete contrast. Translocated species consistently drove homogenization, and they did it across all three dimensions: taxonomic, phylogenetic, and functional, right from the get-go. No initial differentiation phase, just increasing similarity over time, and it accelerated.
Wow, okay. And this leads to the headline statistic, doesn't it? The magnitude of the effect.
This is the shocker. By the final study period, 2022, the cumulative impact, the intensity of homogenization caused by these translocated fish,
Right.
it was up to 2 to 4 times greater than the homogenization caused by the alien fish.
2 to 4 times. Can you give us the numbers on that?
Yeah. For example, looking at taxonomic diversity, the species lists, translocated species, caused about a 3.0% decrease in dissimilarity, meaning a 3% increase in similar alien species, only about 1.2%.
That is a huge difference. It completely reframes where the biggest threat is coming from.
It really does. And the reason why they're so much more potent, it's almost, well, it's straightforward when you think about it.
Okay.
Translocated species just find it easier to establish and spread. They come from the same regional species pool. They're already adapted to the general climate, the water chemistry, maybe similar predators or food sources.
So they're pre-adapted in a way.
Exactly. They're functionally and phylogenetically much more similar to the native species in the places they invade compared to true aliens. They slot in more easily.
But hang on, if they're so similar functionally and phylogenetically, why is their spread such a big deal? Shouldn't they just, replace like with like, fill a similar niche? Why is blending in the bigger problem here?
That's a great question. Because the threat isn't just about one species replacing another within a spot. It's about losing the difference between spots. Think about it like this. Imagine every valley has its own unique dialect.
Okay.
If someone moves from Valley A to Valley B and their dialect starts spreading in Valley B, the overall linguistic diversity between the valleys decreases. They become more similar.
Right, you lose the regional distinctiveness.
Precisely. It's the same ecologically. When we move a fish that's successful in River A and it thrives when we put it in River B, we're essentially making River B look more like River A. We're erasing the unique ecological signature of River B. These translocated species are so effective because they're similar enough to thrive regionally. And that very success means they rapidly increase the number of shared species, shared evolutionary history, shared functional traits between previously distinct water bodies. They blur the lines.
That's a really clear analogy. Okay, so they're potent homogenizers.
Right.
What did the study find about the underlying causes? What human activities or environmental factors are really driving this?
Well, the models pointed to some interesting things, especially regarding that idea of biotic resistance we mentioned earlier.
Right, the theory that diverse native communities should resist invaders. Did they find that?
Actually, no. They found very little support for the biotic resistance hypothesis in this system. In fact, it was the opposite. High native diversity was often positively correlated with homogenization.
Wait, so the richest, most diverse native ecosystems were more likely to be homogenized. How does that work? That sounds completely backwards.
It does seem counterintuitive, doesn't it? But it supports an alternative idea called the biotic acceptance hypothesis.
Okay.
The thinking is that areas with high native diversity are often just really good habitats. They have the right conditions, resources, environmental stability that allow many species, including natives, to thrive.
So those same good conditions also make it easier for non-natives, especially those regionally adapted translocated ones, to move in and establish.
Exactly. The quality of the environment itself might be the main factor determining invasion success, rather than just competition from the natives. It suggests good spots are good for everyone, native or non-native.
Okay, that makes sense. What about the direct human impacts?
Huge factor. The model showed that anthropogenic disturbance explained a large chunk of the variation, and specifically, the degree of habitat fragmentation was critical.
Fragmentation, so dams, reservoirs.
Yes, things like dam construction, building reservoirs,
Yeah.
these physically change the riverscape. They turn flowing river sections, what scientists call lotic habitats, into still, lake-like water bodies, lentic habitats.
Which favors different kinds of fish.
Right.
Yeah.
It homogenizes the physical environment, first off. It also blocks migration paths for native species that need to move. And these change conditions often favor non-native species that are generalists, more tolerant of disturbed or lake-like environments. This whole process massively accelerates homogenization.
And they also teased out some indirect effects, didn't they? How things like economic activity play a role.
They did. Using those structural equation models, the SEMs, they found that things like the overall human footprint index and gross regional product, basically measures of human activity and economic development, they primarily impacted diversity indirectly,
How so?
mostly by increasing habitat fragmentation. So the economic activity leads to more dams, more reservoirs, more infrastructure that breaks up the river. It's that physical fragmentation that then directly drives the loss of distinctiveness.
So fragmentation is the key bottleneck, the mechanism through which broader human pressures translate into this specific ecological damage.
That seems to be a major pathway, yes.
Okay, given that translocated species are emerging as this unexpectedly large threat, what are the immediate takeaways for conservation, for policy?
Well, the implication is pretty stark and urgent. Management strategies really must start prioritizing the prevention of intra-regional translocations, moving species around within the same broad region.
The ones we've been overlooking.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because these are often driven by activities that seem benign or even helpful locally, like aquaculture, stocking fish for recreation. But they often happen with very little regulatory oversight, unlike, say, importing a truly alien species.
Did the paper give any examples of this going wrong?
Yeah, they mentioned a case in the Langkang River. Hydropower development impacted a local native fish. So, to compensate, another fish, a Schizothorax species, was brought in from a nearby drainage basin. It looked like restoration, perhaps, but it was actually introducing a species outside its native range, contributing to long-term homogenization.
Replacing a local specialist with a regional generalist, essentially.
Often, yes. And the regulatory side is worrying, too. The studies show that the rate of non-native fish occurrences hasn't really slowed down, even after China implemented relevant laws.
So the laws aren't working, or aren't targeting the right thing.
It suggests likely weak enforcement, but also a critical gap in the regulations themselves. Most laws focus heavily on preventing the introduction of alien species, the international ones. They often don't adequately address, or sometimes completely ignore, the movement of species between different river basins within the same country or region.
So we're like guarding the front door against foreign invaders while leaving the internal doors wide open for these regional homogenizers to spread.
That's a pretty good way to put it, yeah. The regulations seem mismatched to the actual scale of the threat revealed by this study. The impact of translocated species here was 2 to 4 times greater, yet they often get less regulatory attention.
A major disconnect. Before we wrap up, did the authors note any limitations to their own study? Things future research should look into?
They did. They mentioned that having only 4 time periods while covering a long span meant the temporal resolution wasn't super fine-grained. It made it hard to pinpoint the exact moment, the tipping point, when alien species might flip from causing differentiation to causing homogenization.
Okay.
Also, they pointed out something called extinction debt. This is the idea that some species might be effectively doomed due to habitat changes or competition, but they haven't actually disappeared yet. So the current data might underestimate the true level of species loss that's already locked in. The final picture could be worse.
Right, the full impact might take longer to become visible. So stepping back from just controlling introductions, what does this research suggest about fixing the underlying problem, about tackling homogenization itself?
The big message there is about habitat. Managing homogenization isn't just about stopping fish moving around. It requires actively restoring habitat heterogeneity.
Making habitats more diverse again.
Yes. Specifically, restoring river connectivity. That could mean removing old dams that aren't needed anymore, or maybe modifying how existing dams operate to release water in ways that mimic natural river flows. The goal is to create and maintain diverse physical habitats, riffles, pools, different flow speeds, because those favor the diverse native species and make the system more resilient against generalist invaders.
So it's structural change, not just policing species movements.
Both are needed, but the habitat part is fundamental for long-term resilience.
Okay, so this deep dive has really uncovered a crucial twist, hasn't it? The biggest current driver of freshwater fish homogenization, at least in this major hotspot, isn't necessarily the obvious foreign aliens, but these overlooked translocated species. Especially where there's lots of human development and habitat fragmentation, this feels like it should change conservation priorities quite significantly.
I think it has to. And the big takeaway, looking forward, is that while this study's long-term data set was incredibly valuable, we really need more of this kind of monitoring, more detailed, high-resolution biological data collected consistently over time. That's the only way to really track these trajectories accurately and understand the full scope of what we're losing when we move species around, even within our own backyard. We're living in what some call the homogocene, and we need better tools to map it.
It certainly makes you think, doesn't it? How often might seemingly small local actions stocking a pond, connecting two streams, have these large-scale, long-term consequences for the uniqueness of our natural world? Something for all of you to consider. And that brings us to the end of this deep dive.